Martin, Susan, Kevin, and Rachel Hendricks looked like the picture of an ordinary American family until one quiet summer night on Highway 62, when a simple traffic stop turned into a chaotic chase that exposed years of hidden lies, vanished identities, and a secret that would tear their entire family apart. It began like any other quiet summer night in Maple Hollow, a small town tucked between rolling hills and endless fields of corn. The streets were nearly empty, and the sky stretched wide and clear, lit by a pale moon. Around 10:45 p.m., Officer Dan Riker cruised along Highway 62, sipping lukewarm coffee and listening to the soft hum of his patrol car's radio. It had been a slow evening, no accidents, no bar fights, just the steady sound of tires against asphalt. That calm was broken when a blue minivan drifted across the center line ahead of him. At first, Riker assumed the driver might be tired or distracted. It wasn't uncommon for someone to nod off after a long shift. He slowed down, watching as the van swerved again, this time grazing the white shoulder line before jerking back into the lane. His instincts kicked in. He switched on his dashboard camera, set his coffee aside, and flipped on the flashing lights. The red and blue glow washed over the empty highway, cutting through the still night. The van didn't slow down right away. It kept rolling, steady but defiant, as if the driver hadn't noticed or worse, didn't care. After about 30 seconds, Riker keyed his radio, reporting the possible DUI. Dispatch confirmed the plate belonged to a local family, the Hendricks. They lived just a few miles away, in a tidy white farmhouse near the river. Martin Hendricks was a mechanic, his wife Susan a school librarian. They had two grown children still living at home, Kevin and Rachel. Nothing about them ever raised red flags. They were quiet, polite, the kind of people everyone waved to at the grocery store. The thought that they might be involved in anything suspicious never crossed Riker's mind. When the van finally drifted toward the shoulder, its brake lights flickering unevenly, Riker felt a strange tension in the air. The way it stopped wasn't right. It didn't come to a clean halt, but rather rolled forward a few more feet before jerking to a stop. He parked behind it and stepped out carefully. The night was so still he could hear the distant buzz of insects in the fields. His flashlight beam cut across the rear window, but the tint was too dark to see clearly inside. The silhouettes of heads were faintly visible, 4 of them, unmoving. He approached the driver's side slowly, one hand resting near his holster. The driver's window stayed rolled up, and the person behind the wheel didn't move an inch. Riker tapped on the glass. Nothing. He called out for the driver to roll down the window. Still no movement. For a brief second, he thought maybe they were all unconscious, but then the brake lights flashed twice, like a nervous twitch. His pulse quickened. Something wasn't right. He took a small step back and radioed for backup. The dispatcher acknowledged his call, sending another unit from town. As he waited, he circled toward the passenger side, shining his light inside. He could see faces now pale, stiff, and staring straight ahead. No one looked at him, no one blinked. It felt less like a traffic stop and more like a moment caught in time, like the whole family was frozen in place. The backup officer was still 5 minutes away, but every instinct told Riker he couldn't wait that long. Just as he reached for his door handle to call for another response unit, the van's engine roared to life and the tires screeched against the asphalt. In a blur of motion, the blue minivan shot forward into the darkness, leaving the officer standing in the flashing light, realizing this was no ordinary traffic stop. The van sped off so suddenly that it took Officer Riker a moment to react. His heart jumped as the tires screeched and the sound of gravel sprayed against his car. He rushed back into his cruiser, flicked on the siren, and hit the gas. The chase was on. The red and blue lights cut through the dark highway, the flashing reflections bouncing across road signs and the glinting guardrail. Ahead, the van wove from lane to lane, its taillights vanishing and reappearing as it took the sharp turns of Highway 62. Riker radioed dispatch, his voice steady but urgent. Within minutes, another patrol car joined in from the next county over, setting up ahead to block any chance of escape. The van, though, seemed to know every bend of the road. It slowed just enough to take corners, then accelerated again, hugging the edge of the pavement like a driver on a mission. The strangest part was that the family didn't seem to be trying to outrun the police completely. They didn't take wild risks or speed recklessly through intersections. Instead, it felt like they were leading the officers somewhere. The pursuit carried them past the outskirts of Maple Hollow, through stretches of farmland and empty industrial lots. The night air was thick, people with dust and the distant rumble of thunder. Every few minutes, lightning flickered on the horizon, illuminating the van in ghostly flashes. From inside his cruiser, Riker could see brief glimpses of movement through the rear window, shadows shifting, hands waving, someone in the back turning around to look. When the van veered off the main road onto a narrow dirt trail, Riker's stomach dropped. He knew that area well. It led deep into the woods, toward a cluster of old hunting cabins that hadn't been used in years. The ground was uneven, littered with rocks and roots. The chase slowed as the vehicles bounced and jolted across the rough path. Mud splattered the windshields, and branches scraped against the sides of the cars. After nearly 20 minutes of pursuit, the van suddenly braked hard and skidded sideways into a clearing. The engine roared once more, then went silent. The headlights stayed on, cutting bright beams into the trees. Riker stopped about 20 feet behind it and waited for the second officer to pull in alongside him. Both men stepped out carefully, flashlights in hand, voices steady as they called for the driver to exit. There was no response. They moved closer. The driver's door was wide open, swinging slightly in the breeze. The interior light flickered weakly, revealing empty seats. The keys were still in the ignition, the engine warm, and the faint smell of exhaust hung in the air. It was as if the entire family had vanished in seconds. The doors to the back were unlocked, and inside lay a few odd items: a half-packed suitcase, an open first aid kit, and a small pile of papers scattered across the floor. The officers exchanged uneasy glances. Riker's flashlight beams swept over the tree line, catching a faint trail of footprints leading away from the clearing. There were footsteps pressed deep into the soft dirt. They led toward an old wooden cabin just visible through the trees. Its windows were dark, and its roof sagged under years of neglect. Riker could feel his pulse thudding in his ears as the night fell silent again. Whatever had started as a simple traffic stop had turned into something far more unsettling, and the truth waited somewhere ahead, hidden in the shadows of those woods. The air around the cabin felt heavy, thick with the smell of rain-soaked earth and old wood. The two officers moved cautiously through the clearing, flashlights cutting across the overgrown weeds that brushed against their legs. The trail of footprints was clear at first, pressed deep into the mud, but the closer they got to the cabin, the more it faded. The Hendricks family seemed to have vanished into the shadows. Riker could feel the unease growing in his chest. The cabin stood in eerie silence, its windows boarded up, its front door hanging loosely from one hinge. It looked abandoned, but a faint light flickered from inside, small and unsteady, like the glow of a candle. Riker gestured to his partner, and they approached from opposite sides. The boards creaked under their boots, and when Riker pushed the door open, it gave way with a long, dragging groan. The air inside was damp and musty, the smell of rot mixed with something metallic. Their flashlights swept across the room, revealing stacks of canned food, jugs of water, and a tangle of old blankets piled in one corner. Someone had been staying there recently. On a wooden table sat a laptop, its screen dim but still glowing. A single tab was open, showing a local news article about missing people from nearby towns. The faces of several men and women stared out from the screen, each marked as still missing. Next to the laptop were maps of surrounding counties, some marked with circles and handwritten notes. It looked like someone had been keeping track of something or someone. Riker's partner checked the back room and found more strange items. There were half-empty boxes filled with personal belongings, driver's licenses, wallets, and old photographs. The names didn't match the faces. Some IDs were clearly fake, printed on cheap plastic, while others were real but years out of date. The air grew colder the deeper they went into the cabin. It wasn't just the chill of the night, but a sense that they had stepped into something far beyond a routine pursuit. Riker called for backup again, his voice low and steady. As they waited, a noise broke the silence, a faint thump from somewhere beneath the floor. Both men froze. The sound came again, dull and rhythmic, like footsteps moving below them. Riker crouched and noticed a hatch partially hidden under an old rug. It had a metal handle, rusted with age. He shined his light on it, but before he could open it, a flash of lightning lit up the windows, followed by a roll of thunder so loud it shook the walls. When the light faded, the flickering candle went out, plunging them into darkness. In that moment of pitch-black silence, the hatch creaked slightly, as if being pulled shut from below. Riker lunged forward, grabbing the handle, but it was too late. The sound stopped. The only thing left was the echo of rain hammering the tin roof. When more officers arrived minutes later, they searched every inch of the cabin. The hatch led to a narrow crawl space that was empty except for muddy footprints leading to a broken vent that opened out the back. The family had escaped again, slipping into the woods just before the storm hit. By the time daylight came, the rain had washed away the last traces of their trail. The only thing left behind was that laptop, still glowing faintly on the table, its screen frozen on the faces of the missing. 2 days passed before there was another sign of the Hendricks family. The storm had flooded the back roads, and the muddy forest made search efforts slow and frustrating. Officers combed through the woods, the riverbanks, and even nearby farms, but every lead went nowhere. It was as if the family had disappeared completely. Then, on the third morning, a call came in from a farmer named Harold Tate who lived a mile from the Hendricks home. He reported hearing strange noises from his storm cellar late at night, voices whispering, footsteps moving around, and the sound of something dragging across the floor. When deputies arrived, Harold was waiting nervously by his porch, clutching a flashlight. He led them to the cellar behind the house, a small concrete shelter built into a hill. The door was secured with an old latch, and faint scuff marks showed it had been opened recently. As the deputies approached, they heard movement from inside. The air was still, heavy with tension. They pulled the latch, swung the door open, and shouted for anyone inside to come out. After a few seconds, four figures emerged one by one. The Hendricks family, pale and soaked, their clothes streaked with mud. They didn't resist arrest. Martin kept his eyes on the ground. Susan clutched her son's arm tightly, trembling but silent. Kevin and Rachel looked dazed, as if they hadn't slept in days. The deputies searched the cellar and found food supplies, blankets, and a small radio. It was clear they'd been hiding there since the night of the chase. When asked why they ran, none of them answered. They just kept staring at one another, faces blank, lips pressed shut. Back at the station, investigators tried to piece everything together. The laptop from the cabin was examined, revealing a long list of names and records linked to missing people from several nearby counties. It wasn't just random articles. Someone had been collecting personal data, tracking movements, and even storing photos and identification numbers. The deeper they dug, the stranger it became. Financial records tied to the Hendricks home showed multiple tax refunds issued under different names, some belonging to people who had vanished years earlier. When police searched the Hendricks property, they found something even more disturbing. In the garage, behind a tall shelf stacked with paint cans, one officer noticed a narrow gap in the wall. It didn't look like much, but when they pushed against it, the panel shifted slightly. Behind it was a hidden staircase leading down into a small basement no one knew existed. The air was stale, and the light from their flashlights revealed boxes stacked neatly against the walls. Inside those boxes were old wallets, photos, and documents belonging to people listed in the missing persons reports. Some of the items dated back more than a decade. It was clear the family had been living double lives for years. They had assumed the identities of people who'd disappeared, collected benefits, and built an entire network of false records to keep it going. It was too organized to be random. Someone in that family had planned it carefully. but when questioned separately, each one told a different story. Martin claimed he had no idea what was happening. Susan insisted she thought the documents were just junk from her husband's repair shop. Kevin said he had never been in the basement. Rachel remained completely silent, staring at the table in front of her. It was her silence that unsettled the detectives the most, as if she knew more than anyone else and wasn't he afraid to let the truth sit quietly between them. The town of Maple Hollow had never seen anything like it. The story spread quickly, first through whispers at the diner and then across every news station in the region. Reporters camped outside the courthouse, their cameras aimed at the Hendricks family each time they were escorted in for questioning. To the public, they looked like an ordinary family caught in something extraordinary: confused faces, trembling hands, and the constant air of disbelief. But behind closed doors, investigators were unraveling a web far more complicated than anyone expected. For weeks, detectives combed through the family's financial history, tracing every false claim, every account opened under someone else's name. The operation was clever, almost professional. Whoever had built it understood how to move unnoticed. Martin's bank records showed transfers he swore he never made. Susan's name appeared on tax documents she insisted she'd never seen. Even Kevin's college savings account had been drained and funneled into other identities. It was Rachel, the youngest, who seemed untouched by any of it until the analysts discovered that most of the fake online accounts had been created from her old laptop. The evidence pointed toward her, but her reaction stayed the same: calm, detached, unreadable. When detectives presented her with proof of her involvement, she didn't cry or argue. She only said that she never meant for things to go this far. That single sentence became the focus of every headline. Prosecutors pieced together a timeline that stretched back nearly 12 years. Rachel had been just 15 when the first fraudulent identity appeared. It was a small mistake in a state database someone marked as missing but never declared dead. Rachel, obsessed with true crime and online forums, had seen an opportunity. At first, it was just curiosity, a fascination with how easy it was to create an identity that no one would question, but it grew from there. Over the years, she used her parents' information, tax software, and stolen records to build entire lives out of thin air. She convinced her father to sign documents, claiming it was part of her college project. She told her mother she was studying local history when she gathered files on missing people. Her brother helped her set up email accounts, never realizing they were being used for fraud. One by one, she pulled them into her web without ever revealing the truth. By the time her father discovered what she had been doing, the paper trail was too long to undo. That discovery came on the night of the traffic stop. Martin had found the files on her computer earlier that evening and confronted her during the drive. The argument grew heated and the van began swerving, which caught Officer Riker's attention. When the flashing lights appeared behind them, everyone in the car panicked. Susan thought Martin was hiding something. Kevin assumed his sister had done something far worse. And Rachel, realizing it was all unraveling, urged them to run. In that moment of confusion and fear, they made the decision that sealed their fate. During the trial, the truth finally emerged. Rachel was sentenced to 12 years in prison for fraud, forgery, and obstruction. Her parents received probation for their involvement, and Kevin, though cleared of criminal charges, left town soon after. The farmhouse was sold, the hidden basement sealed, and the cabin in the woods demolished. Still, the story of the Hendricks family lingered in Maple Hollow, retold in hushed voices whenever the wind carried down Highway 62. People remembered the night when a normal family lost control and the smallest spark of deception turned into a fire that consumed them all.